I don't think it's a matter of before or after. It's a nuclear war if they do. So I think Russia made that point as clear as possible, that if you do that, there will be consequences, and these consequences will be dire. And then if people want to know what dire means, go buy Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War Scenario, and read it, and you'll understand how in 72 minutes the entire world ends. That's the consequences, guys. My wife always tells me, don't read the comments. Don't read the comments. For all you stupid people out there, and I call you stupid, and I'd call it to you in your face, because this gets insulting after, not me personally, but humanity. All the things you're advocating for will inevitably lead to the destruction of the entire world.
Today, humanity teeters on the edge of an unimaginable catastrophe. Experts like Annie Jacobson warn that in the event of a nuclear exchange, civilization as we know it could be obliterated within 72 minutes. Such is the speed and scale of modern nuclear warfare. What began as a regional power struggle in Ukraine has now escalated into a looming global crisis. The U.S., by deploying long-range missiles, may have unwittingly opened the door to nuclear conflict. With over 12,500 nuclear warheads spread across the globe, and 90% controlled by the U.S. and Russia, just one missile strike could trigger devastation on a massive scale. This is no longer a conflict between nations. It's a countdown to a potential Armageddon. As tensions between Russia and the West intensify, the world watches with bated breath. Could this be the misstep that leads to irreversible nuclear catastrophe? In this video, we dissect the geopolitical chessboard, the stakes of this deadly game, and the grim consequences that could spell the end of humanity as we know it. The Ukraine conflict has reached a dangerous tipping point. The US's decision to send long-range missiles to Ukraine has significantly escalated tensions, with Russia perceiving this as a direct threat to its sovereignty and national security. According to Russia's 2020 nuclear deterrence policy, it reserves the right to deploy nuclear weapons in response to any aggression that jeopardizes its territorial integrity. President Vladimir Putin has drawn unmistakable red lines, warning that any missile deployment targeting Russian territory could provoke a devastating response, including nuclear retaliation. A 2021 poll by the Moscow Times reveals that 68% of Russians view NATO's actions as hostile, intensifying national sentiment and further complicating diplomacy. For Moscow, the presence of U.S. missiles in Ukraine is more than a strategic challenge. It is perceived as a threat to its very survival. Putin has already indicated his readiness to respond with overwhelming force, including the potential use of nuclear weapons if necessary. This isn't just a shift in military strategy. It heightens global instability and reshapes the boundaries of the conflict. The slightest misstep or misjudgment could trigger an uncontrollable nuclear exchange, with catastrophic consequences. The world now finds itself at the brink of a nuclear precipice, where every missile fired risks accelerating us toward global devastation. The war in Ukraine spans multiple fronts, each one fraught with the potential for a nuclear flashpoint. The situation mirrors the tension of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, but with an added layer of danger. Today's weapons are not only faster and deadlier, but also increasingly automated, heightening the risk of catastrophic miscalculations. In Donetsk, Russian forces continue to advance despite fierce Ukrainian resistance. The region is of immense strategic value to both sides, but it has now become a dangerous powder keg. Russia views the deployment of U.S. long-range missiles not merely as a tactical maneuver, but as a direct provocation to its control of the area. Moscow has publicly drawn a nuclear red line, warning that any perceived threat to Russian-controlled territory could prompt nuclear retaliation, bringing the region closer to disaster with each passing day. Zaporizhia and Kherson, regions Russia now claims as part of its constitutional territory, are even more volatile. Any perceived threat here risks triggering an immediate and overwhelming response from Moscow. These areas are key to Russia's strategic depth, and their loss would be seen as a threat to its survival. The Kremlin has already made clear that any significant challenge to its control could prompt nuclear escalation, making these regions particularly vulnerable to a rapid spiral into chaos. While Odessa and Mykolaiv are not currently under Russian control, they carry immense historical and strategic significance. For Russia, these cities are more than just military targets. They symbolize the lost glory of the Russian Empire. Should the conflict spread to these regions, the risks of a nuclear standoff would increase dramatically. The deployment of U.S. missile systems here would not only heighten military tensions but also provoke a symbolic clash, potentially triggering a wider chain of nuclear responses. The volatile mix of regional dynamics, historical claims, and missile deployments creates a dangerously unstable environment. Russia's military doctrine, which emphasizes the importance of strategic depth, suggests that any threat to these regions, particularly Donetsk and Zaporizhia, could lead to an overwhelming and potentially nuclear response. Each region represents a unique flashpoint, and any miscalculation or misstep could trigger a chain reaction with devastating global consequences. The deployment of U.S. long-range missiles in Ukraine represents not merely a tactical escalation, but a seismic shift in the global geopolitical landscape. According to a 2023 report by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the world's nuclear stockpile is not just symbolic. These weapons possess the power to annihilate humanity multiple times over. With U.S. missiles now in Ukraine, the likelihood of nuclear confrontation skyrockets. Russian military doctrine explicitly allows for the use of nuclear weapons in response to a perceived threat to its national security, particularly when territorial integrity is endangered. This move by the U.S. teeters on the edge of a global catastrophe. In the context of nuclear strategy, every action becomes amplified. The introduction of these missile systems reduces the threshold for nuclear conflict, making even a single missile launch a potential trigger for devastating retaliation. These modern systems are designed for immediate counterstrikes, allowing little time for rational deliberation in the heat of conflict. This creates a perilous environment where the risk of catastrophic miscalculation escalates with each passing day. Once nuclear weapons are deployed, the chain of events is irreversible. A nuclear exchange would not be confined to a war zone. The fallout would transcend borders, leaving nations far from the battlefield to suffer severe consequences. Europe, already destabilized by the conflict, would face an existential threat with millions of lives hanging in the balance. The long-standing concept of mutually assured destruction, which has served as a deterrent for decades, may no longer function as a safeguard. Instead, it could become a grim reality, with no escape. Beyond the immediate human toll, the economic and environmental fallout would be catastrophic. The global economy, already fragile, would likely collapse overnight. According to estimates, even a limited nuclear exchange could slash global GDP by over 50% within days, plunging the world into unprecedented poverty and social breakdown. Entire systems of production and trade would grind to a halt, leading to shortages of essential goods and triggering mass unrest. Environmentally, the consequences are equally dire. The Global Challenges Foundation warns that nuclear conflict could lead to a nuclear winter, reducing global temperatures by up to 7 degrees Celsius. Such a drastic climate shift would decimate global food production, leading to widespread famine and suffering on an unimaginable scale. What was once theoretical, the end of human civilization as we know it, could become our collective reality. In this volatile environment, the U.S.'s decision to deploy long-range missiles could be the tipping point that destabilizes the precarious balance keeping nuclear conflict at bay. The implications are vast, and the consequences, should a miscalculation occur. International security experts have long warned of the dangers of nuclear war, but recent developments in Ukraine have brought these warnings to the fore. The automatic nature of nuclear defense systems, both in the U.S. and Russia, means that once a missile is launched, rational decisions can no longer be made. It is a system designed for immediate retaliation and leaves no room for diplomatic intervention or second thoughts. Hans Christensen, director of the Nuclear Information Project, has repeatedly stated that Russia's automated nuclear retaliation systems, such as the perimeter dead hand system, could be triggered by any perceived missile threat, leading to an unstoppable chain reaction. The concept of launch on detect is a frightening reality. If Russia detects a missile launch that it considers a threat, it will respond immediately. There is no time for negotiation and no chance to change course. The nuclear arsenals of the world's superpowers are being unleashed and humanity is facing its darkest hour. The launch on detect protocol, present in both US and Russian nuclear arsenals, drastically reduces decision time. Once a missile is detected, the retaliation is almost immediate, with no room for diplomacy or reassessment, increasing the odds of a catastrophic miscalculation. Scott Ritter has warned that this conflict has the potential to spiral out of control in ways we cannot even fathom. Once the nuclear threshold is crossed, everything will be set in motion. The devastation would be total. Entire cities would disappear from the map in seconds, and millions of people would lose their lives. The world order would collapse, and the survivors, if there are any, would be faced with a world that can no longer be compared to the one we know today. The US decision to send long-range missiles to Ukraine is a dangerous game in which the ultimate price looms: the end of humanity. As history has shown, missteps in nuclear policy can bring the world to the brink of destruction, just as we saw during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But today, with over 6,000 operational warheads between the US and Russia, any escalation could lead to mutually assured destruction on an unprecedented scale. Russia's red lines are clear, and with each new escalation, the world moves closer to a nuclear conflict. It is no longer a question of if, but when. The stakes could not be higher. The fate of the world now hangs in the balance, and the actions of a few could decide the future of billions of people. The fate of the world is now measured in minutes, with nuclear weapons capable of annihilating entire cities in seconds. The global community must act swiftly, because once the threshold is crossed, there's no turning back. If you enjoy these type of videos, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thank you.